Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and today I'm reviewing Dying Light, the board game from Glass Cannon Unplugged. Dying Light is a 1 to 4 player, cooperative, scenario-driven parkour game, which is a lot of buzzwords, but all of those are true. And this, before we get into it further, this is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But the basic idea, like I said already, is this is a scenario-driven game. It's worth noting, I'm going to call this more of a first impressions than a review, because I've only given one scenario from the game, and there's supposedly be a lot more scenarios, there'll be a lot more content, there's going to be additional things and stuff, and rules and cards and zombies and all these different, I don't know if they're zombies officially, whatever they are, there's going to be a bunch of different things to explore and to experience that I have not gotten to do so. So, very much consider this a first impressions, not because of my limited playtime, but because there's only a limited slice of what I can actually play. And past that, let's dive into the general how to play, and please keep in mind some of these things will change based on the scenario stuff you're going through in a full proper game. But past that, the general idea is you are given a scenario, a bunch of story cards. Story cards you're going to be going through one step at a time as you start with the first one, escaping the junkyard. You there. I don't know which hole you crawled out of, but you sure got in over your heads. That gate just closed behind you. It ain't opening anytime soon. There's a nest right next to you, and it's almost dawn. Do the math. Do what I say though, and you might just make it. The fence is live, there's 2 switches southeast and northwest of your location. Flip them to kill it, and you go out the northern gate. Now tell me you copy all that, stay on the channel, and go. That's card 1. Now, basically, in this scenario over here, you have 2 switches, 1, 2, we have these over here. We have to get our various people to those switches, deactivate them, the gate will open, at which point we go to scenario card 2, but that's the part where I'm going to not spoil this further for you, but the general idea is you're going to be given a scenario which gives you objectives to go through. You'll be wandering around the map, you'll be going to different places, you'll be gathering different items, you'll be dealing with the various enemies along the way, but this is a scenario that is going to be giving you a story that you're unlocking slowly, bit by bit, as you accomplish the different objectives. Meanwhile, the way you're dealing with this is, like I said already, the parkour part. This is not a game where your goal is to kill everything. This is a game where you'll be lucky to kill, well, I mean, anywhere near. All the stuff you see over here, you will barely be touching any of this. So this incredibly, high cinematic table presence that it has with walls and buildings and zombies and you and all these things. And these sculpts over here, these are some, incredible sculpts as far as the 3D, detailing or the cinematic aspect of the way you're jumping over people. But the general idea of the game is you're engaging with that parkour element by rolling these dice. So you're going to have a bunch of dice for your character. Let's leave this momentum die behind. You're going to go ahead and roll those dice. Let's roll them on this building over here. And you're going to go ahead. That's a terrible roll, by the way, but we'll deal with it. Let's pretend we got that over there. There we go. Slightly better. In fact, let's pretend we got that. Let's just entirely re-roll this just because it'll be a little cooler, potentially. That's actually pretty much similar. But either way, you're going to be going ahead and utilizing these dice and using these dice for actions. Now, any die can be used for an action, but these symbols on the dice will give you more flexibility. This basic, horseshoe kind of symbol, that mitigates your risk. Risk is going to be one of the things you're constantly dealing with whenever you take an action, especially if there are zombies present in that action, although some actions have risk inherently involved, and you're going to use those dice to mitigate your risk. Meanwhile, other dice have special symbols in them where you can use them to do other different things, to be able to pull yourself up and be able to go ahead and elevate yourself in the scenario without spending extra dice, because the default idea in the game is you can go ahead and attack, and you can run, and you can jump, and you can climb, you can do all these things, but some actions take more dice than others, of course, unless you're using special symbols. And so you're trying to figure out what is the most efficient way towards my goals? Being mindful of the fact that as you go through the scenario, the more noise, the more attention you drive to yourself, the more these zombies are going to react. And so you're trying to play a little bit of a game where you want to do more, especially because as you do enough stuff on your track over here, you'll unlock this momentum die, which you can start using every round, and it can also power up some of your inherent abilities. You have these abilities over here that get stronger if you're currently engaged with momentum. If you are currently moving faster, your blood is pumping, your adrenaline is moving, and you're getting more done in the game. The downside is the more you get done every round, the more noise and attention you attract, and that means the more of these cards you're going to be flipping over, resolving the various symbols of the movement and spawning that the enemies are going to engage with as they try to take you down. And so you're playing this delicate balance of a game where you want to do more, but also not too much, and you're trying to figure out the situation you're in, and when do you need to go ahead and run a little faster and punch a little harder, versus when do you want to go a little slower because there's a little too many enemies around you, and you can't afford that additional attention. During the day phase, you'll have a bit more control. You're going to take actions with the various players in the turn order of your choice, and then the enemies are going to go ahead and respond based on whatever noise you drove your way. But in the night phase, once the game switches over to night, we're going to have a little track over here. This starting scenario only gives you one round of day before you move directly into night. That's where things get a little more chaotic. You're going to be drawing from a deck where it doesn't give you a degree of determination, as much determination over what you do. It's going to be random. Do these zombies act? Do you act? How they're going to act and address and respond to what you're doing? Because like I said already, they're always engaging with what you do. you run, jump across the map, they have a bunch of zombies who are now spawning in zones around you and trying to attack you and move in with you, which is where you're going to be attacking them as well. You're going to be rolling attack dice to try to go ahead and take them out, paying attention to the stats on any individual card. And the basic biters that start off on the map, they're not that much of a threat, but as you unlock more enemies, some of them can start climbing with you. Those buildings seem safer at first. Go ahead, spend an extra action, spend a special die, go ahead and elevate yourself to the next level where the zombies can't get to you. The only downside is very often in the game, you have to interact with spots on the board that are going to require you to get down to their level, and then also, like I said already, those stronger, more powerful zombies will be climbing right there up with you, trying to take you down. This is where the core actions are going to have you, like I said, elevate to the next level, jump across 2 buildings, jump across down to be able to go over fences or enemies in the way to be able to move down, take down the enemies in your way, climb up to the next building, engage with whatever scenario-driven objectives are there as you go through these story cards, trying to manage and mitigate your own threat against you. You can afford to take wounds. There are going to be light wounds, which have no real effect. They just count against you. But then you flip those to heavy wounds, dealing with whatever consequences there, for better or for worse, until eventually you take too many wounds and potentially die, which is generally something I recommend avoiding if you're trying to win the scenario. But that's basically what this is. It's a dash of Zombicide, a dash of, I don't really know what else to put in here. It's a dash of a bunch of games all combined in which the core idea of the game is not about, killing any individual thing. It's not about escaping the map. It's all about going through a sequence of cards that give you escalating degrees of goals and trying to do so with, to a certain extent, as much style as possible. That's not necessarily the goal of the game, but it will feel satisfying to jump up one building, jump across to the next, go ahead and dash down, do a slide kick, use some sort of equipment to grappling your hook up to a higher tower. You're going to be trying to feel cool as you go through it, because this is a game about trying to manage and mitigate your actions while trying to appear as cool as possible. And that is basically Dying Light, the board game. Which brings us to the review, starting off with ease of play. And ease of play is a little bit mixed on this one. The rules themselves were actually not that long to get through. I will say, prototype, all the usual caveats, prototype experience and all that. But the rules themselves weren't the clearest to me. I had a lot of issues or questions around them. Thankfully, Rolling Solo did a great series of rules around the game that I found very useful to clearing up the issues that I found less obvious from the rules. But again, hopefully prototype rules, and hopefully that won't be your experience. But again, I don't think the actual game is that complicated, as more of just a rules issue. But the game itself is fairly straightforward as far as the actions you can take on your turn, how the zombies react on the turn, the enemies react on their turn, and how the sequence of the game generally flows. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what I like, which is to begin with, and this is hard not to talk more about, but the sheer table presence is a big deal. This kind of builds off what Glass Cannon Unplugged did with Apex Legends in terms of the 3D terrain, the general table presence, the same style of approach, but I love the way it looks and feels over here. And not just looks, but the way it feels as well. The sense of parkour is very present in this game. This is a game where it's not about moving zone to zone, it's about trying to figure out the coolest way, because coolest is one of those nice things about the game is that the coolest way to do things is often the best way to do things, which is a nice sense of you want to go ahead and you want to climb the buildings, you want to jump down, you want to jump over zones, you want to go ahead and kill a few zombies on the way out while running away from the others. You want to constantly be engaging with this, not in a game that feels like a run and gun experience in its own right, where your goal is to kill as many things as possible, but rather this really does feel like the game is focused on trying to give you that sense of, well, Dying Light the video game. If you've ever played Dying Light the video game, it has that kind of sense and appeal to it. It's about your control, your flexibility, your ability to get yourself in and out of hard situations. And yes, you will have to kill, shoot, and deal with things along the way, but that's not the main point or focus of what you're doing. And the game gives you that sense. It gives you that sense that's present in the video game, but in a board game form, which I'm personally very impressed by the fact that it did that. The dice selection activation puzzle over here, it's a decent puzzle in the sense that you are constantly trying to play that line of, in general, you want to move faster. Not just because of the dice. It's a weird thing where if you move slower on the game, then you can go ahead and benefit from the fact that there's going to be less stuff heading your way to get in your way. But the flip side is if you move faster, you get not just the extra dice, but you also get those additional bonuses from your personal skills, and those bonuses can be incredibly useful. If you're playing as Prescott over here with his air kick, his air kick is incredibly useful if you can utilize it with momentum. You're basically rolling higher on your dice attacks, taking a lot of the guesswork out of whether you can actually take down the enemies along the way. And so trying to move a little bit faster while also dealing with the fact that depending on your role, you have extra actions, extra things you can do both offensively and defensively to be able to use at your disposal. So you can be trying to navigate those roles. And I like the overall dice selection system. It is not the coolest system I've ever seen, but it works well for the style and feel of this game. I like the procedural story cards. Many games of this ilk give you kind of a one-shot, here's your scenario, here's your goal, accomplish these things, grab these things, that's the end of the situation. These story cards give you a degree of actual choice around what's happening, sometimes with a sense of, things that could go either way depending on how they resolve, but you have an escalation of, well, an actual board that iterates or changes. It's not just about like, hey, start here and get here, rather it's about start here, go there, come back here, come around here, head back here, do these things, and I'm very curious to see how many scenarios I actually have. But these are not just a better way to engage with the system, but I also think they have a degree of replayability. Very often I find with these types of more story-driven goals, sometimes you have less of an incentive to actually go through the puzzle. I don't think that's present in this one. The way these work is it very much does feel like it's just playing through an episode. It doesn't feel like a campaign, it doesn't feel like a large narrative. There's enough story if you want it, but really the core puzzle of what you're trying to do is still going to be there, whether you play through this again and again with different characters, different iterations, and so I like the way they handled all of that general, well, puzzle. As far as things I don't like in the game, first of all, I'll say that, and you saw me do this a little bit with the starting roll, but the blanks are the least satisfying part. It's already true that these like little risk mitigation stuff are just the less fun rolls compared to any of these abilities over here, but getting blanks is just a completely just non-fun moment. Yes, you can still use the dice. Yes, they still power of actions, but it's less satisfying to go ahead and utilize a blank face compared to anything else, and so that's just like, I don't know, it's just in a game full of often fun moments, it's the one part of the game that feels less fun as you're going through it. I'll say that you don't really have a lot of agency over being able to fully avoid swarms. One of the things I found a little bit frustrating with the game is that when you're going through these rolling of the dice, you're constantly going to be drawing cards, and they're random as far as what you get, which means you're constantly going to have zombies spawning and moving directly into your zone. It's very hard to actually stay out of the reach of many of the zombies, or at least not for very long. And while that gives you a degree of sense of pressure on the game, I almost wish the pressure had come from more zombies and more of a constantly feeling like they're on your tail, as opposed to actually literally being on your tail all the time. The fact that you can't, more often than not, you can't actually escape having them swarm your zone, it took a little bit of the fun away from being able to feel clever. I'd almost rather the game gave you twice as many zombies on the board to actually have to deal with, but with you having a little bit more agency of actually often being out of their reach if you played it well, which I didn't find to be as much the case. As far as things I can see others not liking, first of all, the dice rolling in general. For me, it's more with the blanks than anything else, but at the end of the day, if you're trying to do a cool series of moves, and you can't actually get the right dice to be able to jump, or to be able to climb, or to do whatever you need, that's going to take a little bit away from what you can do, so there definitely is a degree of luck in the experience. I'll say you'll frequently be overwhelmed with enemies. This is not a game where you're going to be taking down the enemies that are being thrown at you. This is a game where the entire board is constantly swarming, and it's your job to basically just accomplish your goals and deal with the enemies in your immediate vicinity when you have to, but that's about it. And then lastly, I'll say that as much as for me, I don't think the replayability is a factor in the scenarios, it might be a factor for you. At the end of the day, you are going through the story cards, you are dealing with whatever comes your way, and that means that if you kind of engage with these more of a one-and-done situation, then it might take away a little bit away from your desire to replay this kind of thing. In any case, let's go ahead and dive into final thoughts on this one. And again, first impressions, primarily because there's more to see. The entire rulebook, the entire experience is laden with, but you'll see more of this, you'll see more of that, there'll be more of these things. And of course, the fact that I only have one scenario to actually go through means this very much is a prototype review. This very much is a first impressions based on a limited subset of what this game has to offer. But with that said, I like what this game has to offer. So far, I like what Dying Light has to offer in terms of, to me, one of the big questions when I'm diving into a game like this is, of course, I was interested in seeing it. Sure, it's got zombies, it's got fun stuff, it's coming from glass cannon, all those things seemed interesting. But at the end of the day, is this going to be a game that really builds off what the premise is? How are they going to make it feel like Dying Light the video game, which I have had a chance to play and have enjoyed that one, and so how are you going to make it feel like it's not just another zombie survival cooperative game? And the answer is just throw a lot of parkour in the mix, throw a lot of elevating buildings and jumping down and engaging with the enemies along the way and have them constantly trying to swarm you. The whole experience felt like it did deliver on a game that didn't just feel like just one more zombie game where you're trying to kill a bunch of zombies along the way. Rather, they made it much more about the scenarios. They made it much more about the objectives. They made it about trying to go from point A to point B to point C, back to point A, go ahead and get that thing. And so between the stuff you unlock, between the journey along the way, between the constant trailing the same areas of the same map, it does give you the sense of Dying Light the video game, which most importantly makes it feel different than other zombie games out there. That's one of the biggest problems in board games is that, well, biggest problems is a stretch. One of the problems I have to face in board games is that so often great games come out that just feel like other games that already exist. And then it's a question of, okay, well, are you better than those other games? Dying Light doesn't feel like the other games. It feels different. It feels like It feels like it has some of the similarities that you'll experience from a general cooperative survival game, while very much leaning into the things that made the video game great and managing to bring them to your table in a pretty decent format overall. So rating-wise, tentative-wise, because again, first impressions, tentative rating-wise, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. I like a lot of what it's doing. It feels good, and most importantly for me, it also feels different. As far as other game recommendations, it's going to be hard to give recommendations based on this one because it does feel different than other games I've experienced. I can't think of another game that gives those parkour elements, but the closest things I can come to suggestion-wise is going to be Zombicide if you just want a general, zombie killing experience that has a little bit less of the leaning into the scenario sequencing that this does. But my favorite Zombicide game is going to be Black Plague, or Marvel Zombies for that matter. And if you're looking for the only other game I could think of that kind of did lean into the similar feeling that this game brings me, it's going to be Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice. Kind of has a similar vibe of you feeling cool, you feeling like you're engaging in some degree of parkour, of climbing buildings, of hiding between areas, of taking things out. If you like those kind of experiences, I think Assassin's Creed the board game, or Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice to be more specifically, is going to be another game I recommend. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.